you're able to hear me, that you're able to see the screen. And a quick note to let you know that this is being recorded so that it is made available to you and all of those who couldn't join us live today after the fact. Your questions, if you have any, will not be shown in the recording. Those are completely anonymous and only I can see them. For those of you just joining, my name is Chantal Brine. I am the CEO of On Point, and today is part two, or is webinar number 2 of part 2 of the NSCC Alumni Series. So sorry, I'm just going to bounce back to the beginning slide there. I see some new folks are joining us, so welcome to everyone. Again, today we are talking around mastering the pitch. And so the topics that are in this part 2 of the webinar series were voted on, probably by some of you joining us today. And so we're really happy to dive into this. Just a quick plug, if you have not, if this is the first time that you're joining us, please note that all 4 previous sessions are available to you as well, where we've gone through a wealth of other information. In particular interest, you'll hear me talk about it a little bit today as we go through today's content, is the Career Kickstarter. So that would have been the first webinar that we did in part 1 of the series that is available to you now as an NSCC student or alumni, that it may be helpful to go back and rewatch, or if you haven't watched that yet, you weren't able to join us for that session, to just go do a quick perusal, if nothing else, because that really sets the tone for how you're then able to form your pitch. So what we talk about in Cole's Notes version is creating a career target that then all of your toolkit, of which your pitch is a part, aligns to and works towards. So again, just a quick plug, if you haven't watched the earlier videos from part 1 of the webinar series, they are all available to you via recording through the links that NSCC Alumni has been sharing. So without further ado, we are going to jump right in. Again, if you did not see this slide before and you just joined us, please make sure you can see the slides, that you can hear my voice, and if you've got any questions as we're going through, please pop them into the question bar. Nobody else will see those but myself, and we will come back to those questions once we work through the content. And so before we dive 100% into the content, I actually want to get a bit of a sense from you where it is that you are most curious or worried about as it relates to the topic at hand. Again, some of you would have probably been contributors to when the initial survey was done and shared. For those of you that weren't, either way, I'm curious, what is it that you are most curious about? So if we make this the most beneficial 30 minutes for you, you've given your time to it today, what do we cover in enough detail that you can leave feeling that this was valuable use of your time? For those of you that are typing in other, I invite you to share with me via the questions panel what it is that is standing out for you. And again, we'll make sure that we address that through a presentation as well. Just a couple more seconds here. Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. And again, this is really helpful. Absolutely, we're going to talk to all of these points. Again, for those of you that mentioned the other, please pop it into the question panel, and so that we point me in the right direction so we can spend some time on what is of most use for you. Without further ado, we're going to start to talk around what the pitch is, and then we're quickly going to move into why does it matter and how does it actually apply, because clearly we're talking about it as part of your job search strategy and toolkit for a reason. So let's start with normalizing what it is. You know, oftentimes we hear a pitch and we think that it means, we think of elevator pitch, we think of a pitch contest, we think of that it's this contrived situation or scenario in which we're going to have this perfect delivered message that we're going to tell to anybody who's willing to listen. Not really. A pitch is simply, what is your story in a nutshell? If you were to boil down to a couple key sentences about who you are, what you're about, to somebody that you are talking to for a reason, we'll come back to that. What are the 2 to 3 key messages that you want to leave them with? What can you share that is unique to who you are, that is authentic, so it doesn't feel salesy, so it doesn't feel like you are forcing something, but yet so that it is concise, it's a true lived experience of who you are, and those things alone combined allow you to be able to stand out. So we're going to come back to a couple of these key components as we revisit a couple different ways. When we talk around the pitch, you've already heard me say, and this is just to give you a little bit of a formula, so to speak, to think about. And for those of you clearly, you can't see me, but I just use air quotes. So when I say formula, it's not to get you into that this is what you absolutely have to use in a pitch, but it's a framework that over the work that we've done with about 2,000 early stage career starters, we found to be really helpful because it gets you kind of out of your own head a little bit. So really simply, the pitch is a little bit about who you are, what you're about, and then what we refer to as the so what factor, or why does it matter? What we're going to walk through today, and what during the Q&A period of time we'll have a little more time to go through if you've got specific scenarios you want to run through with me, is how do you move away from only talking about the who you are, because this tends to be a bit of the safe zone, right? We tend to be able to say very easily, hi, my name is Chris. I'm a current NSCC student studying at the Akerley campus in trades. Now, I'm making that up clearly. Well, that's great, Chris. But why are you studying? Let's say it's architectural drafting. Why are you studying architectural drafting? What is it about that interests you? What particular skills did you bring into that diploma, that program, that industry that you are looking to be able to express with any organization that you join? Why is that what you chose to pursue? Are you passionate about some component of that? If so, what is that? How are you motivated in that particular field, industry of exploration? So now you can start to see that you're moving into a little bit more of the things that are going to be unique to you. Because if I take two of you from the BBA program and ask you why you joined that program, your answers are likely to be different. I'd argue if they're not, that probably means we're not digging deep enough. So if I was to ask you a different question, say, what are you looking to explore by taking that program? What are you passionate about? What are you curious about exploring? Again, if this is an area that maybe you're struggling with, I encourage you to go review the Career Kickstarter, because we tap into this in a lot more detail, because this middle piece here, combined and sandwiched with the first and the third, are really how to make this pitch be something that is not salesy, it's unique to you, it helps you stand out because it's authentic and because it's true. Right? And then you move into the so what factor. The so what factor is the part of the pitch, so to speak, that's going to change depending upon what event you're at, who you're in front of, and what you're trying to do. So we'll come back to this because we're going to use a couple of examples, and I'm actually going to hopefully get you to volunteer a couple of examples of, in your view, where you see this could be of most use. So we're going to keep referring back to this formula. Who are you? What are you about? And so what? In relation to, well, why are we even talking about this? Why does it matter, Chantel? Well, here's why. From a recruitment perspective, your goal as a candidate is to stand out. One of the ways that you do not want to stand out is by being inconsistent. Consistency in your story and in your brand and in your overall promise, so to speak, as a candidate or job seeker or potential employee or potential entrepreneur, is to be consistent in communicating who you are, what you're about, and why does it matter, or what's the particular connection given whatever venue that is in. So for example, in a networking event, absolutely, this is going to be one of the areas where the very first thing you're going to do when you introduce yourself to somebody is tell them a little bit about who you are. Hopefully you go to that next step and tell them a little bit about what you're about. Maybe you don't go all the way to the so what factor right away, but during the conversation, you're able to tie that in and make the connection to how does your area of expertise and interests, motivations, and passions connect with that individual's. Again, we'll come back to this in a particular couple of examples. Networking is by far and large, though, the biggest example that you can think of where your pitch is relevant. You already have a pitch, even if you don't think you do. It's the introductory statement. It's the introduction to who you are. Think about it if you're, used to writing papers. It's the introductory paragraph, so to speak. What is the 2 to 3 key messages that you are going to share with somebody that they get enough of a sense of who you are, what you're about, and is there a reason for you to want to build a relationship together because there's a connection of some kind that's authentic? That is what networking is about. Again, we do whole sessions on networking, but the relevance here is that very first piece of when you walk into a room, you are absolutely given cause to have to use your pitch. Think about it as an introduction if that makes it feel easier. At the end of the day, the context is the same. In an interview, it goes a little bit deeper because you've given somebody that introductory statement during a networking event. And hopefully you followed up and you've reintroduced some of your key statements, your key messages during that follow-up email. And maybe then the follow-up meeting is either an informational interview, a coffee chat, or an actual formal interview where you are going to take your foundation, so your pitch, so to speak, and you're going to expand on it. You're going to go deeper into your skill sets, into your areas of interest. You're going to go deeper into the things that you're passionate about and how you're motivated and how that translates into that particular organization, that particular role with that particular company. So you can see here it's an evolution, right? Same thing when you're volunteering. How do you show up? How do you introduce yourself to other volunteers that you're working with? When you're working on projects with teammates and classmates, how do you show up? What 2 to 3 key things would they say that describe you? And do they align to how you would choose to describe you to somebody who's a stranger? Online, again, we do whole sessions around this, but a quick note here that your pitch should align so that when I look at, for example, your LinkedIn and I read your summary section as somebody, as an employer, as a recruiter, if I've met you at a networking event, you've given me a couple introductory sentences, we've agreed to follow up on LinkedIn. On your LinkedIn, I'm hoping to see some consistency in what you've shared with me already in terms of who you are and what you're about, and then a little bit more detail. When we talk around how it relates to how other people would describe you, there are many different data points here that you can use both to filter into your pitch, but know that the outcome needs to be the same, and that if I ask somebody who's worked with you how they would describe your skills, your strengths, your passions, your areas of interest, and how it was that you were able to help them in a particular team, does it align to what you would be saying to me? So remember the formula: who you are, right? What you're about, and the so what piece, okay? Again, if you've got questions as we're going through, continue to pop them in there, okay? When we talk about a pitch, its relevance really is in a couple different factors. The biggest one, ladies and gents, is really to be able to help you prepare for eventual conversations in your job search process, or as you are building out your client list, for those of you that are more entrepreneurially geared. It relates to things like your resume. Your pitch is your 2 to 3 key messages about who you are and what you're about and why I should care as an employer. I'm hoping to see an echo of those things when I look at your resume, not just in your summary, but in the examples that you use in your resume. Again, we went into much more detail about resumes rather, in part 1 of the series. So feel free to revisit that recording. But think of this as building a continuous message that is almost like, think of it as you're reinforcing to me as the recruiter who doesn't know you from anybody else, that you are great for my organization because you are interested in, you are skilled and have areas of expertise and knowledge, and you are excited to continue learning about things that relate to my business, and you are willing to work so hard because. So who you are, what you're about, and the so what factor. I'm looking for a continuation of that when I meet you at a networking event, when you're introduced to me by a teacher, by somebody in the alumni office, by one of your colleagues, your classmates. and then to when I connect with you on LinkedIn or an online profile that you have. So about.me is another online profile that tends to be used within the more creative design communities, technical communities as well. So I'm looking to build a bit of a brand around who you are and what you're about that all starts with the 2 to 3 key messages that you are picking when you meet me at a networking event, when you are introduced to me, that help me understand who you are and what you're about, and is there a connection for the two of us? Absolutely. When you get into interviewing, think about it in terms of one of the first questions or somewhere during the interview, you're likely to get asked, tell me about yourself. It's the pitch. It's the 2 to 3 key messages that help somebody understand what it is that you are interested in, what you're passionate about, how your skills, your education, your expertise align to that, and how those two things combine, or how those many things combine to be able to help their organization succeed. And of course, we've already talked about general networking. Just some considerations here in terms of connecting this to the other components that design with your brand, and also some really good data points. If you're struggling to come up with that introductory pitch, tap into resources like your teachers who know you well, classmates who you've worked with together, previous colleagues, family members, spouses, friends who know you well, a coach if you've got somebody in your group that, or somebody in your life that fills that role. Sometimes getting different data points can be really helpful. It's helpful because it gives you a bit of a self-awareness check, but also sometimes we're really uncomfortable talking about ourselves. So this whole idea of a pitch, that's part of the reason it feels so salesy. So if you're getting data from other people, sometimes it makes it feel a bit more objective and less icky, at least to get you started. Okay. So part of what I'm curious about in terms of before we move into, or as we move into the next session, just out of curiosity, how many folks have participated in some kind of pitch contest, whether that's the Halifax partnership, Cape Breton partnership, or a business pitch contest even, I would consider as relevant here, a case study competition where you've had to maybe pitch in front of a group of individuals, anything where you've had to take that idea of communicating a couple key messages, trying to get to an outcome of some kind. Okay, so super helpful here in that we've got a fair amount that haven't yet, and that's okay. And again, sometimes what happens with the contest side of things is it feels too contrived. There's a reason I'm asking, and we'll come back to it in a second. But this is very helpful, so thank you for those of you who just contributed to that. When we look at why I was curious about that, my biggest tip to you, and again, as somebody who has worked with a lot of young early stage career folks, and has seen many individuals struggle with this particular component of their toolkit, the biggest thing that can make a difference is actually just doing it. And I know that seems so common sense. It's not revolutionary, I know, but it's actually just to practice those data points and collections that we just walked through in terms of asking people in your life to provide to you those 2 to 3 key things that they think about when they think about you as a candidate, as an employer, as an entrepreneur, help you to come up with what I refer to as kind of your starter story, right? So this piece here where you look at it and say, you know what, just be able to create something to start with, and then you're just going to test it. Test it with somebody who's safe to begin with at first. So somebody who you trust, who you feel comfortable with, because you don't want nerves to get in the way for the first couple of times. And then as you start to go to networking events, either on campus, off campus, this is a really great time of year for networking. We're in November right now. So if you are going to any networking events, industry events, meetups, just start to pay attention a little bit more so maybe than what you're already doing in terms of how others are introducing themselves to you, because there's sometimes always something we can learn from that. But then also use it as an opportunity to try how you are going to introduce yourself, maybe a little bit differently. So part of as you're going through today's workshop and as you think about this afterwards, think about where maybe you're doing really strong in communicating those 2 to 3 key messages, and then maybe where you're not weaving in as much detail or maybe being as particular enough as you could to help you stand out, and take those as takeaways. As you continue to practice, you refine. right? So don't beat yourself up if you go to a networking event and you introduce yourself and you stumble and or you leave the conversation going, oh my gracious, what did I just say to that person? Did I really just say that? It's okay. It's part of the learning process. But be mindful that you want to be able to refine. So take notes, and we're going to come back to this in a little bit, because part of this is you've got an audience, right? So you're going to pay attention to how your audience reacts to what you're saying and use that to figure out if you've got the right combination of unique, authentic content without feeling too salesy, really too much like I'm trying to force my messages down your throat. That's not the goal here. And then be very mindful that when you are at maybe more in general networking versus an employer or job specific, that has a different lens, particularly much more so to the so what component of the formula. Because if you are in an interview or you are at let's say you're interested in working with RBC, if you're at an RBC specific event, if what you are looking to do is when you make those introductory sentences is connect who you are and what you're about to what RBC is about. What does RBC care about? What are their values? How do their passions around community or youth engagement or diversity align to things that you are passionate about? Key here, again, it's got to be authentic, but you get my point, right? We've already talked about the ensuring consistency, so we're not going to revisit that one. Some of the other things that I wanted to share in relation to being able to advance is understanding that there's a balance here of not feeling too rehearsed. This is sometimes where people feel really pitchy, and it can't be authentic. So if you are sitting there thinking, oh my gracious, I need to script out my 2 to 3 key messages, and that's what I'm going to say every single time, you're probably setting yourself up to not be authentic during those conversations, because we just can't as human beings. If you're consistently comparing what it is you think you should be saying, well, you're not really in the moment there. So there's a difference between preparing and rehearsing. Preparing is what we talked about in terms of practicing and refining and hearing and getting input from other people. Rehearsing is when you get to a point where, again, if you write down your 2 to 3 key messages and you expect yourself to have to say those 2 to 3 key messages each and every single time, it doesn't feel authentic when you're in the meeting. And chances are you're also missing an opportunity to adjust that so what factor, because if it's rehearsed, that means it's not tailored to that specific networking event style, employer who you're talking to, colleague, potential teammate, whatever have you. So the preparation is key, but not so much to the point that you feel like you have to say the same thing and that you feel scripted all the time, right? Going to the other side of things a little bit, the other reason for preparation is so that you are targeted, so that at least you can be concise and intentional in your message. Because if not, what sometimes can happen is people ramble. They give too many details. They don't give enough details. It's too vague. And so the person that you're communicating with walks away going, I have no sweet clue what Jen is interested in doing, which means I can't help you. So the reason for practicing is to become really intentional that you are curating your top 2 to 3 key messages about who you are, what you're about, and why does it matter. The other thing sometimes that we hear from individuals, particularly because it kind of feels like it's too much about about yourself, but is leaving out what it is that you're passionate about. If you can't get to something you're passionate about, what are you curious about? What are you intrigued by, interested in? What do you find yourself thinking about consistently and constantly? Because that is going to be unique to you. So this is one of the biggest ways to be able to make sure that you don't feel like it's a pitch, like and salesy during that conversation, but rather that you're truly being able to just communicate a little bit about what makes you you. So make sure that you're involving that in your discussion and in kind of your preparation, because that's a magical thing. The other thing that happens for most of us, and it may not happen right away, but as you get more comfortable with this, when you can start to talk about something that you're authentically engaged in, interested in, curious about, or passionate about, your body language relaxes. You become much more visibly engaging, which tells me as the audience that you're communicating with that this is real, that this is authentic. And it also relaxes you a little bit to open up more to the conversation, which again is really key here, because the whole point of this is that you're trying to move past that introduction to whether it's a coffee conversation, an interview, being able to submit an application, being able to build a relationship of some kind, right? The balance of everything that we're talking about in terms of that authentic versus salesy, if you find yourself wanting to use jargon and you find yourself trying to weave in all of these subject matter expert terms, chances are that's going to turn off the person that you're talking to, unless you're in a very specific setting that is geared towards your area of expertise, in which case this rule of thumb doesn't apply as much, because you're all in the room because of shared common expertise, which means probably you're going to talk more around that subject content, as opposed to in a more general networking event where it's a bit more generalized in terms of area of interest, area, industry of interest, service, product, whatever have you. So same thing as we give advice in terms of resumes, use plain language as much as possible, because it allows to make a much more authentic connection, right? The balance then is not underestimating or underestimating your skills. And we'll come back to this when we use a couple different examples, all right? Some key things here, some really easy indicators to know if you are on the right path. Do you actually feel good? So after, and again, maybe not the first couple of times, but after a while, do you kind of leave an event, let's say as an example, and go, yeah, you know what? That felt good. And when you're talking, if you can, try and pay a little bit of attention to your body language. So is your body language sheltered and closed off? Are you shrinking in on yourself? Are you actually maybe visibly cringing? If you are, then we're not there yet. If, however, you find yourself relaxed, your arms maybe hanging by your sides, or if you're a hand talker like myself, then you're using your hands, you're animated, you're making eye contact, you're pausing, you're smiling, the other person across from you is smiling, and you feel good in your gut. That is the biggest indicator that you've hit the sweet spot, at least from a comfort level. Now, the other component to this is that the person that you are talking to, do they mirror how you're feeling? Do they seem engaged? So if you're in person, are they mirroring your body language that's positive? So are they arms down or open or animated as well, interacting with you? Is their body angled towards you? Are they shrinking back away from you? That's not a great sign most of the time. Are they making eye contact? Are they smiling? Are they nodding? Do you find them glancing around the room? Are they looking at their watch? Again, you get a sense for that there are indicators that from when you're in person anyway, you can kind of get a sense and say, okay, actually, am I sharing enough of the kinds of things that this person's actually interested in knowing more? If you're getting that kind of reaction, chances are you're giving the right kind of information in enough detail about who you are, what you're about, and likely you've successfully communicated some kind of so what factor because they're engaged. They want to know more. If they're asking questions, if they are diving deeper, if they're clarifying things that you're saying with them, if it actually turns into a dialogue of some kind, as opposed to a handshake, nice to meet you, my name is Bob, I am a current NSCC student interested in accounting and really, really passionate about just working with numbers, but helping people understand their numbers better. What brought you to the event? Now, clearly that was rushed a little bit, but that's pretty precise and to the point. There's no natural pauses there. Didn't give somebody an opportunity to ask questions. If the person reciprocates with something very simple and then quickly goes on to watch somebody else, then maybe there's something missing there, right? So again, in person, you can actually watch the body language. You can see how people engage. Online, it's a little bit harder. You are still watching to see if they engage in some way, shape, or form, but you're not going to be able to see their body language. If you're on the phone, same thing, right? So if you've got a phone screen for a job process that you're applying for, you're going to get asked some kind of question that you're going to pull in part of your pitch where they're going to say, tell me about yourself. Tell me why you think you're a great fit for this role. Why should we continue considering you for as an applicant for this role? All the same thing. But at least if you can pretend that you're in person and be as animated as possible authentically, so it's not about over exaggerating here, but it's about not letting the phone become like an obstacle in that. And if they ask questions, allow for maybe a little bit of a pause when you talk, so that they can interject if they need to. And then you'll start to get a feel for, again, once you do this a couple times, that practice really does make it so that you get much more succinct. It becomes much more authentic feeling. It feels genuine. You don't feel as salesy or as robotic or maybe as rehearsed. And you start noticing that you get the response that you're looking for. So for example, if you're at a networking event and you're there because you're trying to make connections in your industry, you're not going to make those in-depth connections during the networking event. Your goal is to introduce yourself to a couple of people, schedule follow-up meetings, and then build the relationship and the rapport from there. If you get to that point, then you know that you've shared enough information when you met them at that networking event in your introductory pitch that they realized there was a reason to continue the dialogue and connection. Again, I know we're at about 12:30, so just a couple more slides here. We were a little late starting, and then we'll jump into the Q&As. So for anybody who needs to leave, please feel free to do so. I want to respect your timelines, but if you're able to stay on for the next little bit, I'm happy to have you do so. I wanted to do a couple of examples, and this is where I'm going to pause and say if anybody has a specific scenario that they want to talk through, whether it's career fair, an interview, or a resume, or if there's something specifically that you've been preparing for that you are comfortable sharing with me in the question pane, we'll dive in. For now, I do see that we've got a question in there that is very relevant, so I'm going to use that. The question is, how do you keep it short but yet remember all of the key points? So let's use an example. Now I'm going to make some things up here just to illustrate. So let's say that you are attending a career fair in January, and you know who the employers are that are coming, and you've created a list of your top 5 to 10 employers that you want to introduce yourself to during that career fair. They're your target, right? You understand that you've mapped out and said, okay, so who am I? Let's say in this case, I am a software, or somebody who's interested in software engineering, specifically web development, and or maybe let's use UI UX as an example. And I've got my 5 to 10 companies, and it's a mix of some small companies and some larger companies. So I'm going to separate those two things out for the purpose of this exercise. When I look at the key messages that I want to communicate, and I break it down and I say, okay, who am I? I am a software engineer professional. I am a professional who is extremely passionate about UI and UX design, because I believe that no product is going to meet the needs of its users without that. And I believe there's just magic when you can figure out the right way to create a solution that is both functional and beautiful to look at. Instead of just saying I'm a current NSCC student studying UI UX design, or I'm studying UX UI design in addition to one of my courses that I'm taking in NSCC, I've actually jumped straight to what it is I'm passionate and interested about, why I'm doing it. Because again, when you can do that, you relax a little bit quicker, and it becomes a much more authentic conversation right from the very beginning, because the reason that you are pursuing that particular career path is going to be different from anybody else who's coming after you. Then you take it to the next step and say, so actually I've spoken to a little bit about who I am and what I'm about. Maybe I want to provide a bit more details, and I say, you know what, so I give the first sentence, say, that's the reason that I'm actually, in addition to my coursework at NSCC, I am taking ABC certifications on the side, because I really want to make sure that the information that I'm gaining is relevant to industry and also very much specific to the kinds of companies that I'm interested in. As an example, ABC company, I really enjoy the products that you create. I think the design of them is so simple, but it's beautiful in its simplicity. I think that's a really hard thing to achieve. And I see a lot of companies struggle with that. Do you mind, could I follow up with somebody from your team to have a bit more of a conversation, understand more about your design process? So that was 4 sentences. It's not long, but it's concise, it's intentional, and I've designed the last piece to relate to the employer I'm in front of. So the keeping it short really has to do with having that intention of why it is you're introducing yourself to somebody at the very beginning. Because if you don't have that in your mind, that's when it becomes a little bit scattered, and think of it as if you were in marketing as an example. If you're trying to speak to too many different audiences, that makes it really hard to keep your message concise and to the point. Same thing goes in terms of your pitch. Be very mindful of who it is that you are looking to make that introduction to. Your top 2 to 3 key messages, that if those are the only things that you have time to communicate, what are those 2 to 3 things that are going to get you the meeting, the interview, the ability to interview with their company, the ability to internship with their company, the ability to volunteer, whatever have you, okay? So great question. Absolutely, I've got somebody asking around pitching for a county or town for government grants, and you need to be able to stand out. So when you're applying a pitch, more so in writing as an example, which by the way applies in resumes and online as well. So we are going to launch right into the Q&A period here, because I've got a couple coming through. Again, for anybody who's not able to stay on the line or stay online, so to speak, please feel free to jump off. For those of you that are able to join us, I'm now going to move fully into questions here. So in terms of how to pitch to a county or town for government grants, one of the biggest, I think, advantages that you can have in any example is going straight to the source, if you can, and or somebody who is familiar with that particular person that you are introducing yourself to or looking to make that pitch to. So if you can, is there somebody within the department or program that you're looking to connect to who you can ask for their advice? Now, you've still got to do your homework, because you've still got to have your 2 to 3 introductory key messages ready to compel them to want to support and provide advice and guidance in such a way that you are steering the conversation. Right? So being able to, again, be very crystal clear around, and I'm sure you are, but if you are applying for a particular grant or you're looking to get a particular funding, what is it that you're looking to achieve? Why? How does that connect to who you are and what you're passionate about? And then can you make any parallels or connections, so i.e. the so what factor, to what it is that you are looking to do or interested or passionate in is connected to the entity, the group, the company that you are looking to get feedback and or funding from. So really it's about making as many sticky connections between who you are and what you're about and what you're trying to do in this particular case to the entity, organization, or grant that you're looking to be able to do for. The standing out piece really applies here in terms of it's that being authentic. So communicating authentically about who you are and what you're about. So sharing your passions and connecting those things to that particular occasion. The other way to help stand out, and this applies for even pitching during a networking event, simple little thing, reach out prior to the networking event. If you know an employer that you are interested in is going to be at a networking event, and you know that you are going to make it a priority to go introduce yourself to whoever's at that employer's booth or someone in particular who's attending, send a note through LinkedIn that is going to encapsulate a little bit about your pitch. So you're introducing yourself, knowing that you're going to have an opportunity to share a little bit more in person. That alone can help you stand out from amongst the sea of individuals that will not take that step. Same thing applies as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's looking to get grants and funding from that perspective. So we've got another question here. As an IT programming student, conversations can get very filled with jargon. Absolutely, how can you keep things to ensure the most amount of information gets across during interviews? Great question, and absolutely, this is one of those cases where For example, even at a networking event, if you're at an industry networking event, depending on the context, if it's less of a meet and greet event and more of a knowledge sharing or distribution and discussion event, then there is going to be more conversation around technical terms, tools, technology, methodologies, etc. And so that's par for the course. During a general networking event, or maybe let's say even in an interview, where you're trying to also communicate some of your soft skills or foundational skills, because those help you stand out. I was on a call earlier today talking about the RBC Humans Wanted report. If you haven't read it, I would absolutely encourage you to read it. It's got some good nuggets in there. One of the biggest from our perspective and takeaways being, something that we've echoed for many years as employers, is that communication skills are a differentiator. So technical skills will get you in the door. They might get you the interview. Communication skills are going to get you the job and keep you the job in any field. And so it's of paramount importance that during a networking event and that introduction, that you're able to demonstrate some of your communication skills just by the sheer nature of how you introduce yourself. So if you launch right into something that is jargon, as opposed to talking a little bit about why is IT programming it for you? What do you enjoy about the field? What are you hoping to do with the field? The fact that you can communicate more abstract concepts during that dialogue will help you stand out. It's also a demonstration of your communication skills. Very different from somebody saying, I have great communication skills, right? So it's about proving it here. During an interview, be very mindful that sometimes there are technical interviews and then there are behavioral interviews. A lot of the times companies will separate out the two just from a time management perspective. So if you are going in and it's a technical interview, absolutely being exposed to and having a bunch of questions, or the majority of questions, be technical in nature in terms of looking at your experience with methodologies, tools, languages, whatever have you, that's normal. However, be again very mindful that how you choose to answer those questions. So how much detail you're able to provide to me as the interviewer about who you are and what you're about, and so why does it matter in relation to the question that I've asked you, will help me understand how your communication skills or your other soft skills are going to help my organization, in addition to you having technical skills that I need. So if you're a great team player, something that you're going to want to weave into your examples would relate to how you've been able to achieve technical projects working with a team. I refer back to, we did the first session we did in part 2 was an interviewing 102 workshop. Some more details in that as well. Okay, so I've got a question about an interview. Again, if anybody, feel free, if you need to drop off, feel free to do so. We're totally in the Q&A period of time, so any other questions, feel free to shoot them in there as we get ready to wrap up here. In terms of an interview, depending upon the scope of the interview or the organization, as much as possible before going into an interview, if you can understand who you're meeting, what their roles are, what the structure of the interview is, and if there's anything you can do to prepare, will help you understand, provide a benchmark, so that when the interview's done, you can get a sense of, okay, did that flow the way that I wanted it to? Was everybody that was supposed to be in the room? Did they ask questions relevant to their role? And do I feel that I've been able to communicate, let's say, my technical skill set if it's a technical interview? The length of an interview does not necessarily determine success of the interview. Again, you've got to put it in context of the interview that you are in. The key component, and very relevant to today's conversation, is, were you successful in communicating enough of the right information so that the interviewer or interviewers understood enough about who you are, what you're about, and why they care, or why it connects to them, or why who you are and what you're interested in can help their organization? Then you can look at that as a foundational success. By the way, for any of you that are interested in having follow-up conversations, I am on LinkedIn. Please feel free to send me a note and connect there. What we will do, again, just wanting to wrap up, if there's any other questions, going to take a pause here and allow for anybody to share any information or any other questions that you've got. And one last poll, and I know we've lost a couple of folks in the meanwhile, but for those of you that are still on, can you just give us a quick sense? I know it's a lot of content in a short amount of time, but hopefully as you reflect on what we've discussed and you actually start to practice things, then you can start to see some shift and change. Another invitation for you, myself, we are constantly at networking events, as are some of your NSCC alumni staff. So if you see any of us at an event, please feel free, come up, introduce yourself, and use us to practice that pitch. Myself, I'm always happy to give feedback too after somebody introduces themselves, if that's something of interest to you. So thank you for those of you that were able to join us for the full time and share information. Again, couple more minutes here. If you've got any other questions, please feel free to put them in. One question here in terms of where do you find the other sessions? Great question. And so part 1 of the series was done and recorded in March and April of this year, and those recordings, there were 3 different sessions. You can find the links to the recordings on the NSCC Alumni Facebook page, and or reach out to the email address that you see there, alumni@nscc.ca, and they can direct you directly to where those links are. The link from the first session of part 2 will be shared shortly. Now, if you, for those of you that are on the call or on the webinar today, you'll actually be sent the recording for this session once it's available. But for the previous ones, I'd encourage you to check out the NSCC Alumni Facebook page or to reach out to the NSCC alumni team there with the email address. Again, thank you all so much for joining. If you have any further questions, I'm happy to stick around for a couple other minutes. If you do not, please enjoy the rest of your windy Wednesday. Thanks so much, folks.